In this video, I'm going to talk about whitespace in Ruby, particularly as it relates to continuing a statement across multiple lines of code. As you probably know, whitespace consists of spaces, tabs, and new lines, and it's typically ignored by the compiler. In other languages like Java and C++, you use a semicolon to indicate that a statement is complete. In Ruby, this is optional, but you could use a semicolon in situations where you have multiple statements on the same line. Ruby has a number of different ways of determining whether the line makes up a complete statement, and in this video I'm going to talk about examples of all of these. As I mentioned, the semicolon is optional. The backslash can always be used to indicate that the compiler should check on the following line for a continuation of the current statement. The dot operator, as it's used in method invocations, can be used to indicate to the compiler that a method invocation on the next line refers to the object preceding the dot. And the comma operator, as it's used in array and hash definitions, can be used to indicate to the compiler that the definition of the array or hash continues on the next line. So in this video I'm going to try to give examples of all of these. This is a simple hello world example, but it's useful to demonstrate how whitespace is treated by Ruby. So I have these two variables, hello and world, and I'm going to start my output with this print command, which doesn't append a new line character to the end of the output. So it's just going to print this character to indicate where the output starts, and then I'm going to follow it with the values of these variables. So if I go over to my command line and run that, I'll see the output as I would expect. Now let's say I wanted to put a comment after the variable hello. It says hello. By doing that, I've commented out the world variable, so the compiler is not going to be able to execute this. If I move that to the next line, what I intend is for Ruby to continue printing that value as if it were on the same line as hello, but Ruby is not going to see it that way. If I run it again, I get an error. It's saying undefined method for world string. And the reason for that is that it sees this line as if it were just in the ether with nothing before it. It doesn't have a context for this command. And that's because this statement looks complete to Ruby. When it reaches the end of this statement, it thinks that it has done its job. The way to indicate to Ruby that you want it to look on the next line for output is to end the line with an operator that tells Ruby it should look on the next line for the rest of the statement. So if I run that, it looks fine. And I can even add my comment. It says hello. It says world. Another way to achieve the same effect is to use the backslash character in place of the plus operator. So if I put a backslash here and put the plus on the next line and run it, the error that I'm getting here is saying that it's finding an unexpected token where it's expecting to find the end of the statement, and this upward pointing arrow, which is between the backslash and the comment, is indicating where it's finding this problem. So what this points to is the fact that the backslash is sensitive to anything that comes after it. So if I remove this and run it again, now it's telling me the same thing, but pointing to what looks like a space after the backslash. So if I go back I can select that and save it, and if I run it again, it works. So the backslash is a way of continuing your statements on the following line, but when you use them you have to be sensitive to anything that comes after it, including spaces. In this example, I'm using the times method from the integer class to print out the hello world text followed by a new line character. And I'm doing this twice because I'm calling the times method on the number 2, which in Ruby is an object. So if I run this, I see the hello world text printed out twice as I expected. Because the dot operator is all that's needed to indicate to Ruby that the statement is not complete, I can move the times call onto the following line, and if I run the program, it runs as before. In this example, I want to show that the same whitespace rules apply to array definitions. I am defining an array called messages, which has 2 elements, hello and world, the strings defined before, and if I run that, we see the output hello world. If I move everything after the comma onto the following line, because of the comma, Ruby knows that I'm not finished with my statement, and it will look onto the next line to see what else I have to say. So if I run it with that change, it's exactly the same. In this example, I just want to show you that when it comes to the rules for whitespace, a definition of a hash is no different from a definition of an array. You may or may not know that a hash is simply a collection of keys and values, and it's not ordered. The number 1 and the number 2 are the keys, and hello and world are the objects that correspond to those keys. So I can use the each value method on the hash to access the hello and world values inside this block. If I run this, I see the output hello world. And because of the whitespace rules in Ruby, Ruby will recognize that if I push everything after the comma onto the following line, the statement has not ended because the comma is an indicator that I have more to say. So if I save that and re-execute it, it's exactly as before. So to sum up, in Ruby, whitespace takes the form of spaces, tabs, and new lines, which are generally ignored by the compiler. Unlike languages like Java and C++, where a semicolon is required to complete a statement, in Ruby you're only required to do that if you have more than one statement on the same line. Ruby knows that you finished your statement if the line is a complete statement, and the way that you specify that is by using one of these operators starting from top to bottom: the optional semicolon, the backslash character as an indication of line continuation, the dot operator as part of a method invocation, or the comma operator as part of a hash or array definition.